Welcome to Real Reviews with SOC. Hope and pray you guys are doing well. If this is your first time here, I would like to personally welcome you to Real Reviews, where we examine film and media through a Christian lens. And we do talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in the film industry and in media. So shout out to a couple of people who are here. Shout out to Nate2D2. He said first. He says, I'm watching this right now, and I'm going to tell you exactly what he's watching. Shout out to Roxby. What's going on, sis? And of course, it's time for the Revelator. What's going on, bro? Thank you for being here. So if you guys don't know, we are doing a one-on-one real review today. And I'm going to be joined by a very special guest, and I'll introduce my guest in just a second. But let me tell you what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about a film that goes by the name of Menace II Society. Now, Menace II Society is a 1993 American teen drama film directed by the Hughes Brothers in their directorial debut. Now, the film is set in Watts and Crenshaw neighborhoods of Los Angeles and follows the life of Kaydee Caine Lawson and his close friends. It gained notoriety for its scenes of violence, profanity, and drug-related content, and also received critical acclaim for its realistic portrayal of urban violence and powerful underlying messages. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you my very special guest. You know her as Michelle Turner. What's going on, sister?
What it do, people?
Oh man, so how you doing, sis?
I'm doing good. It's Thursday. I don't work tomorrow.
You know what? I'm off tomorrow too. I am so happy for that.
Oh, you need to be off though. I don't. I'm what you do.
Thank you for that. Shout out to Mr. Phil Fox, blessings family from the land of, I'm not going to try it. Let's see. Anishinaabe and Potawatomi. Okay. Hopefully I didn't mess that up too bad. But I probably did. Anyway, Michelle Turner. All of us have been choosing one-on-one real reviews. We've done one-on-one. We did it with Chris Bryan Samuel. We reviewed Gattaca. We also had, of course, Mr. Phil Fox, where we reviewed Predator and Prey. It was a very good interview. We talked about a lot of deep-seated issues in the films that we talked about. But out of all the films that you could have chosen, you chose the shenanigans of Menace II Society. So I have to ask you, sis, out of all the films, why did you choose this one to talk about today?
For the streets.
Oh my God.
That's better than my original answer.
Just stop. Stop. Don't start. Oh man. I gotta have the button ready.
This live might end at any moment, y'all. I need y'all to be prepared. If it gets fade to black, it's my fault. And I just need y'all to know already.
It's gonna look like this. It's gonna look like this. Watch this.
Yeah. If that happens, it's all on me. It's all on me. And because they're urban apologists, not me, them. We've done no urban movie. We need to do an urban movie. But I really like Menace Society. Like, I hadn't seen it in like 20 years. But this was like my favorite movie when I first seen it, because I didn't grow up like that or live that kind of life. And it was really fascinating. Like, I think it came out like 1992, and I was like 11. And I was like, people live like this? And I just was like so enamored with this life because, and I won't really say enamored, it just was very different. And it was something that I hadn't seen. And I was like, hey, I snuck and seen it. I wasn't supposed to watch the movie at all. But I have an uncle who is, I want to say he's like 12 years older than me. And so I will always sneak in. Like my first time listening to NWA was with him
Hmm.
because he wasn't that much older than me. Like at 10, I'm like, he's like 22. So he's still young and he's not really paying attention that he shouldn't have kids listening to it. He wasn't supposed to listen to it either because my grandparents weren't for that. He listened to it anyway. But like my introduction to NWA
Misbehaving,
and all of
misbehaving.
yeah, all of us was because of him. And so I snuck and watched that movie and I was like, wow. And plus Caine's dark skin. So but besides that, the movie, like, it was really fascinating to see like all of this stuff. And I'm like, people actually live like this. And the soundtrack, because I bought that with my own money. I wasn't supposed to, so I had to hide it.
Oh my goodness.
The soundtrack was yeah, I was a shenanigans as a
All
kid.
all kinds of rebelliousness.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
just starting off with the rebelliousness, huh?
yeah, we are. But the soundtrack was dope. Like on top of the movie being really it's like acted very well. And the soundtrack was really dope. I just thought it was a really, really good movie to really highlight some of the things that was going on during the time. Like I wasn't really privy to the things going on during the time, but as I got older and I watched it again, like knowing the gang culture and knowing that they like, oh, these gangs are so bad, and like they promised gang members job and never gave the gang members job in California. So like knowing all of this, like it really made the movie even more relevant to me. Like this is how these people are actually living. They don't have livable wages. They are stuck in communities that no one wants to really be stuck in. So that it made me like the movie like even more. But this is legit. This and Tales from the Hood are probably two of my favorite movies.
Wow, wow. You know, I like I said behind the scenes, I was a little hesitant, right? Because I hadn't watched the movie in a long time. Last time I seen this film, I was very young, and I didn't get all the themes. I didn't get all the tidbits of information. So I didn't have an accurate memory of the film. So I watched it again just to kind of prepare for what we were going to talk about today. And immediately I was like, Michelle chose probably one of the most perfect movies for real reviews to talk about just because of the underlying themes, the subtopics, the genre itself, and the
Mm-hmm.
effect on the urban apologetic and urban communities we deal with. So this is a film that, of course, viewer discretion is advised because it does have very strong language and strong violence. So if that's something that triggers
Mm-hmm.
you, maybe you were part of that lifestyle and it brings something up in you, I would say don't watch the film. Be very careful. And of course, if you are going to watch the film, of course, I wouldn't do it around children, of course. Make sure you protect them as well. They don't need to hear some of the stuff in the film, but it is something that reflects life. You know what I mean? This is happening in real life. And just like you said earlier, you were like, man, I can't believe people are living like this. And the thing is, we see the controversy of Hollywood, right? They just showed like extreme things. And a lot of the time we think that everything is just not accurate. But this was very accurate to what we, in a lot of sense, grew up around. And so, it does have an impact on our community. There was one thing in the film, and I'm going to kind of read it, and then I want to get your take on it. The film opens up with Watts riots, 1965. And so I found some information on it. I'm just going to read it off, and then let's just talk a little bit about it and maybe why the film opened up with something like that. All right, so the Watts riots, sometimes referred to as Watts Rebellion or Watts Uprising, took place in the Watts neighborhood and its surrounding areas of Los Angeles from August 11th to August 16th of 1965. Now, on August 11th of 1965, Marquette Fry, a 21-year-old African-American man, was pulled over for drunken driving. After he failed a field sobriety test, officers attempted to arrest him. Marquette resisted arrest with assistance from his mother, Rena Fry. A physical confrontation ensued in which Marquette was struck in the face with a baton. Meanwhile, a crowd of onlookers had gathered. Rumors spread that the police had kicked a pregnant woman who was present at the scene. Now, 6 days of civil unrest followed, motivated in part by allegations of police abuse. Nearly 14,000 members of the California Army National Guard helped suppress the disturbance, which resulted in 34 deaths, as well as over 40 million in property damage. Now, when I saw Watts riots, I was like, I have to admit, I wasn't familiar with what happened exactly, right? You hear little tidbits of information. And so I was like, man, I got to find out what this was about. And then I saw this and I read it. I was like, whoa. So already the film is opening with a very highly hot topic. What were your thoughts about the Watts riots? Is there any information that you know that I didn't share? Just what are your thoughts about that? The fact that it opened up with that.
That's pretty spot on. So just to go back even a little farther, in California, we know the BPP, which is the Black Panther political party. Their main base was in California as well. And so to stop the Black Panther Party, because they were having their rights like open carry like everybody else, they changed the gun laws in California because of them. And then they start pumping Black and brown community with drugs and guns in order to stop the Black Panther Party. Like that is one of the reasons they start pumping our communities full of drugs. So a lot of it started in California with them trying to, really pretty much just be like, no, let's go ahead and get these while we can and stop this, because if these Black people get together and they make all the things happen that they want to make happen, it will shift a power dynamic in the United States, and we won't, like, the oppression that they had and the power that they had won't be as mighty as they wanted it to be. So we had already started with this. So then now you're doing all this stuff in California to stop them. It has a trickle down effect. Now you put drugs in these communities. Now you're over policing these communities because there's a war on drugs and all this other extra stuff. But you're now over policing these communities that you pump drugs in. And if you're over policing communities and you have racist cops, it's automatically going to be a very tense situation. So to get to the Watts riot, it's not really that surprising, because this is what you get when you over police and you don't police properly. And then you pump drugs in communities, and you pump guns in communities. And then you see all the stuff that happens as a result of this. And instead of working to fix it, you work to make it worse. And so none of this is surprising. So watching this movie and seeing this is the neighborhoods that these kids grow up in, this is the environments they grow up in, is not surprising. It's really just like, this is what the end result of segregation, Jim Crow, and all this other stuff is. It's a result of all of this stuff. Like, people are like, oh, that's back in the day, you need to forget about it. You can't forget about something that is still have the ripple effects in neighborhoods and communities today.
You're absolutely right. And I think the film was actually genius with starting with that, because in a sense, number one, they bring everybody who went through it, right? Most, everybody was, there's a lot of people who are still alive that went through that. And so what the film and the directors did, the Hughes Brothers, they put those people back right into that scenario. So when the film begins, your automatic assumption is, okay, this is what's happening now. This is the kind of civil unrest that's going on. And then you see the behavior of course, O-Dog and Caine. And you see the results of their surrounding areas and everything that's influenced them. And so the film starts off running, right? It starts off running. It starts off very calmly, and we'll talk, and I'll get your thoughts on it. And O-Dog kind of runs in with Caine, and they're at the liquor store, and we would call in New York the bodega, but it's a corner store.
I got my 40, homie.
Oh my goodness, yeah. 40 of Aquafina. you would call it your Aqua 40, right?
My Aqua 40.
So they're in there, they're buying alcohol or whatever, and what's happening? The Asian lady's following them around and looking at them, and and automatically the assumption is they're going to steal something. And so again, the film has a way of kind of putting you into their shoes, right? This is not to excuse what happened after and during that scene. And let's make this very clear. On Real Reviews, we do not condone violence or drug use or anything like that. We're not for that at all. But we have to talk about it because it happens in real life. So anyway, these individuals are, purchasing the 40. And what ends up happening is the lady's following him around. He's like, I'm not going to steal nothing. Why you keep following me? And the assumption is that Black or Hispanic people are going to steal something, right? They kind of open that film up with that. And of course, he gets upset. The guy's like, hurry up. And then he pulls out the gun and shoots the guy who was behind the counter, and then shoots the lady, and then steals the footage. Talk to me about that scene, what that meant to you, watching that scene, and what kind of feelings did it kind of like provoke?
So For one, they didn't ID them. Neither one of them were old enough because old dog wasn't even 18.
Right.
Kaydee had just turned 18. They wasn't even old enough to be buying beer. Let's start with that. You concerned about them stealing, but you're not even following the law because you did not ID these kids to even be selling them alcohol. Whole nother story. He was going to keep change, and then after that, he made this snide remark. And it shows that our words do have consequences. We can't always control what those consequences look like, and that's probably not the best consequences to have, but our words have consequences because he said, I feel sorry for your mother. And it's like that automatically fueled something in old dog. So we don't get like a lot of his backstory, but just like he's very unsupervised. For him to be under 18, he in the streets with older people, he hanging out in the hood, he drinking and smoking. He just he's living real reckless, and it's like he has no kind of supervision. I will say when he's around Caine's grandfather and even around Sharif's dad, he do show a different level of respect than how he acts on the streets. So it shows like he knows better. He just refuses to do better. But it's like he has no type of like nothing. So it's like I don't know what that comment sparked up in him for him to get so angry about it. Because when he said I feel sorry for your mama, it's like you just I'm like, why would that send him over the edge? But because we don't know his backstory, I don't know why that would send him over the edge. Because somebody said to me, I'm like, oh well. But for him, and like Caine's mom was, unalived, because we can't say certain words on YouTube anymore. She was unalived because of drug use. And I don't know where old dog's mom was. She might have been unalived as well, or she might have been a drug addict because there was a lot of crackheads back in those days. So not knowing his situation, you just don't know what that sparked up in him. And then again, not having any kind of supervision, nobody really watching over him. He out drinking and smoking and acting the fool. It's like I could see why that might have took him over the edge living in that kind of neighborhood. And it's like that comment was like already uncalled for. Like you already followed him around. They didn't steal nothing. They was leaving the store. He was very disrespectful, but that comment still was uncalled for. It shouldn't have cost the man his life, but it's like that is your response. Like your response to that comment was so explosive. That is not a response that you would think a normal person would have. So I want you to dig deeper. Like, why would you respond to that comment in that manner? Like even being 15, 16, 17 years old, why would you respond in that manner? Like what would make you explode so heavy over that comment? And that's kind of like rewatching it yesterday. That's kind of what I thought. Like he got that mad over that. Like why?
It reminds me. I know back in the day. I mean, yo mama jokes were like fighting words. Like you talk about somebody's mother, it was an issue. But obviously, like it could have been a multiple things. And I'm glad that you mentioned that his kind of backstory wasn't given, so we can actually. And I think to some degree the director might have done that for the purpose of kind of everybody implanting their own idea of what happened in his backstory, maybe relating a little more to the audience so that way they could kind of insert. Because sometimes directors leave things open for us to insert our own interpretation so we could feel like we're part of the film. So of course, we assume maybe he lost his mother, right? Maybe he lost his mother to some kind of racism or gang violence, and the fact that he mentioned his mother sparked that crazy anger in him because he was already on the edge. I mean, O-Dog, the whole film is on the edge and he is extreme. So yes, he says, okay, we're going to kill him. Well, he kills the guy, shoots him. And you said something that I think was important. And even as Christians, we should take it into consideration and being wise with what you say, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. This man was like, I want no problems. I want no problems. I feel sorry for your mother. I'm like, dude, if you didn't want problems, that was the one thing you don't say to a young kid who is unstable and is already cursing you out. You know what I mean? So he's showing these things. But one of the things that came to my mind, especially because I want to say the name. Okay, Caine. Caine was there with him, and immediately it makes me think, okay, you have to be careful with who you surround yourself with. Because Caine was not going to be the type of person to respond that way to that situation. Maybe, depending on how, what was said. But he was completely shocked. He was like, what? Like, what are you doing? We got like, and this is why it says, evil company corrupts good manners, right? As
Mm-hmm.
Christians, in scripture, it says you have to be careful with the individuals you surround yourself with, because you end up becoming like the people that are around you, or at least you start taking on some of the bad influences. So that was the one thing that kind of stood out to me and kind of made me think of scripture in that way. But there was one way that the film began, and we'll talk, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Caine, I love how his story is told, because, of course, the whole film is told from his perspective in a sense that he's narrating the film. And he says, so it begins the backstory of Caine. He says, my father sold dope. My mother was a heroin addict. And so immediately you think about, okay, here's this kid who's in the middle, and how the fact that it opens up in the home, everybody's partying. And I like that every time it goes into that kind of scene, everything is really dark. Right, it makes you feel like the darkness is there. Right, that's how the director shot it. So you see his mom, you see his dad. He's surrounded by this violence and this chaos. What do you think is going to happen to a young kid being raised in that environment? And because some people will say, "Oh, well, he should have just made better choices." Like, that's not it, right? You have to think a little bit more when you're raised around it and you're raised up in that kind of lifestyle. Your automatic response, usually, unless there's some intervention in between, is that you're going to go in the same direction as your parents. That's usually the case. And as we saw throughout the film, that's exactly what happened. When he goes out to the stoop, Caine as a young kid, and the guys, oh, well, give him something to drink, let him try it. And so you have all of these influences, these temptations in a sense, and that kind of sets the trajectory. And this is why it's so important for us as Christians to make sure that we raise our children in the way they should go, because there's going to be somebody or some intervention that's going to raise them in the way they should not go. But as far as like that opening scene when, he's talking about it and what happens in that scene, like, what are your thoughts about that? What do you think about it?
He was definitely raised in a very bad environment. He was like, he makes a comment who was like, it shows when his dad killed the guy. I mean, he was like, he was like, that wouldn't be the last time I seen my dad, kill somebody. I'm like, your dad just murdered people in front of kids?
Yeah.
Like what? Like, you just cavalier with just murdering folks in front of children. And then then he was like, when I was 10, my dad was, murdered in a drug deal gone bad. And it's like, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Because that's how he was running around killing people, acting a plum fool, selling dope and all this other stuff. What do you expect your life to be like? It's very rare that people actually make it out the game to have a old age. They'd be like, oh, some of these drug dealers retire and open stores and stuff. That is actually not the norm. That is not the norm at all. One of my friends just got hit. He was the leader of one of the gangs here. I won't say which one, but he was leader of a gang here. I'm not. I ain't worried about it. But he just got hit with RICO charges and murder, soliciting murder, all kinds of stuff. And they was like, we've been watching him for a while. And I remember a conversation because his dad was murdered because his dad was a drug dealer and his mom was on drugs really bad. So his aunt raised him. His aunt and my mom were friends. And when we were young, it was probably like a little bit after Menace II Society came out. Me and his other cousin were friends. And so me and his other cousin was talking, and he's probably like, at the time, he probably was like 13 when we was like 11, or 14 when we was like 11. He was older than us. And we were sitting there talking, and he said, I want y'all to, make sure y'all stay in school and be good. Mind you, he's not that much older than us, so we're looking at him crazy. He was like, because if I got to do what I got to do, everybody gonna regret that I had to do what I had to do. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, so is he gonna take a test or something? Because I wasn't raised up in this environment. Right. So I'm like, is he gonna show the teacher that he know what he's talking about? I didn't know. And so then as we got older, I had seen him again. We was like, I went to Ohio State. And so the neighborhood around Ohio State is the neighborhood he was control over. And then I was talking to him. He was like, yeah, He was like, I'm taking over. I'm taking over. This is gonna all be mine. And I'm laughing like, can't own this. Again, I'm in college. I wasn't really raised this way. I'm like, whatever. I'm not worried about none of that. And then he gets hit with all these charges because he's the actual leader over the whole thing. I said,
Wow.
oh, he was serious when he told me this. But his environment, like his brother wind up being murdered for some stuff. And he went and murdered everybody who knew who did it and the person. So those are some of the charges that he got. So now he's never gonna get out of jail. He's
Wow.
never, ever, because they was like he was like on kingpin status. I was like, he was doing all this, but I'm really not surprised because at 14, he was like, he already made it clear. But at such a young age, he didn't see or value his future much because of the things that he already been through at such a young age. That's the only reason I'm telling his story. Um, because of that. And so he was surrounded by these things. And so even though his I had got him when he was a little older, after everything had happened, he had already seen all this stuff. And so he didn't see much in his future, but what he's seen as a kid in his household. And the trajectory was now he's probably never going to get out of jail. And he he winds up being the king in this game.
Oh my
And it's
goodness.
like I just yeah, so it's like but he did a lot of stuff to become this. And so the amount of stuff that you have to do, the amount of your morality that you have to like sear to become this person is crazy. So we see O Dog would probably had he not went to jail, would have probably become my friend. Like he would legit have become my friend. And I don't even say my friend. We knew each other as kids. I was friends with his cousin who graduated from college and has his own business. That's who my actual friend was. But but he but I see how even though him and my friend are in the same family, my actual friend was raised with his parents. He raised in a good home. He went to college for track. He owns his business now. He's a family man. He's a very different person than his cousin because they were raised in two different environments. And like you see how raising your kid, and not all kids will go that way, but again, not it it's very rare that you can kind of take these kids out these environments and try to change them. So just seeing it in real life and how that happens, because I actually thought about him last night after watching Menace II Society. I was like, this doesn't just happen in California.
Hmm.
But these kind of lifestyles, when you have your kids around these kinds of things, even when somebody else tried to help them, once they have been seen and they know all this stuff, because at 10, you're very cognizant of what's going on around you. You
Hmm.
know what's happening. You can understand what's going on. You've already seen your dad murder people. You've seen your mom on drugs. Like these are not things you can unsee. Like I have my little cousin. He lives here with me. He's almost as tall as I am at 10. So
Wow.
it's like 10-year-olds, they like thinking of him singing this stuff, he probably would have been old dog, not even gonna lie. He would
Hmm.
be old dog because he would care because all the stuff that if he would be in these kind of environments, because he's already like, let me see how far I can push this button. Um, but not like in a like I'm an old dog kind of way, but just
Hmm.
as a kid. But as a kid, when you realize you can push all the buttons and nothing's gonna happen, you go farther and farther and farther down the edge. So now you have people in the streets helping you raise your kids, and they're going to teach them street stuff because he was like, Purnell taught me, the streets and stuff. And Purnell was way too old to have been Jada Pinkett Smith's baby daddy in that movie. Ronnie, he's way too old to have been Ronnie's baby daddy. Again, I'm like, they letting R. Kelly stuff happen in the hood. So they act
Mm.
like, Aura ain't do nothing wrong. Yeah, they feel that way because they got a 16-year-old baby mama and they 27. So of course they feel that way. But
Wow.
I'm looking like, we know he way too old to be with that girl. Let's keep this real gangster, good and well. But I digress. That's not what we're talking about. But living that kind of lifestyle and living in those kind of environments, they're not conducive to becoming the best kind of people when that is what you continuously see over and over and over and over again. And it's like you can't put your children in those kind of environments and then be like, oh yeah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They're like, we don't have no boots. So what we're gonna do is sell all dope we can to buy us something to pull ourselves up from them.
Mm.
And then you get so much money because I can tell you from people, not me, I don't sell drugs, but people I know who do. they do make that kind, like people like they don't make that kind of money. Y'all don't know the people I know. They make that kind of money. Like when you are used to literally like having people work for you or you barely work enough and you are out here making 70, $80,000 a month, not a year, a month, then you like, oh, get you a job. Yeah, okay. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying, they making that kind of money in real life. And it's gonna be real hard to tell these people, don't do that. Now you got you some boots for yourself up there, like you're right. And I'm gonna keep pulling myself up with this $70,000 a month.
You know what? Let's touch on that topic because you said quite a few things, but there's a couple of things I wanted to point out that you talked about. Number one was the fact that he got used to the killing. That he became desensitized into it. There was a point in the film, I can't remember the exact line, but he finally kills the person who shot him and was it his cousin, I believe?
His cousin Harold.
Right. He finally killed him. And he said in the film, he said, I don't feel any different, but now it's easier to kill. So the retaliation in the film didn't bring him peace. The only thing that it did do was desensitize him to killing. So now that it's easier to kill the next time. And you see that even from the beginning of the film when he's a young kid and as he's growing up, you see like the corruption of his character, the poverty, the violence, everything is just coming up and it's just kind of slowly corroding his persona. And what a lot, like you said earlier, you said over time, you make these moral compromises and you keep on making these small little decisions that end up taking you and steering you way off course. There was something that I did want to talk about. So films like this, like, let's be honest, films like this in our community are glorified, right? Everybody begins to behave this way. That film, it did portray, but then you think about Snoop Dogg and you think about that whole realm. These individuals are glorified as, icons, and even the music industry and the artists. And all of these individuals, I would say most, if not all, have songs that are derogatory, not only to Black people, Hispanic people, but also to women in general. And the question I want to ask is, even in this film, you hear the music in the background. Now, here's the thing about music and film. If you don't pay attention, you'll find yourself bobbing your head to it. And what ends up happening is you are kind of coming under the delusion that, oh, it sounds good, but you don't pay attention to the words and things like that. And so the question then I kind of have is, are movies like this glorified? If so, why? And what should we do as Christians when it comes to individuals being exposed to this kind of environment? Because again, music and film do have an impact, no matter how mature you are as a Christian, do have an impact on how you think, how you view the world, and even some of the thoughts you have. And I think as Christians, we need to be responsible when it comes to things like this. But anyway, what are your thoughts about that?
So I will say movies like this are glorified. And I think it's because the raw and the realness of it, I don't think is necessarily, it, it shouldn't be glorified in a manner of like, let's do this. It should be, it's glorified in a manner where a lot of this stuff is like really happening to these people. So when NWA first came out, and I only mention them because they're from kind of the same neighborhood as Watts. Like they're all not too far from each other. When that first came out,
and they're on the soundtrack, right? I believe so. Like they're on the soundtrack.
I think they might be. I know MC8, who actually stars in the movie too. He makes the main song when he's like, a messed up childhood. That's the way I am. Like that's MC.
Right.
So what we see is they're coming out and they're rapping about how they actually live, like what they've been through. So I think initially when this all started, it wasn't a glorification of it. It's more of a, this is life for us. This is how we live. This is what we're trying to escape. This is the reality of where we are, because you might have hoods and ghettos everywhere, but hoods and ghettos, some places are worse. Like California may be really bad. Like New York gangs may not be the same as, Cali gangs. So we see like the differences between these different gangs. So when you're listening to music, like when you listen to Southern music, East Coast music, West Coast music, they all have a different style and they all kind of have the same message, but the way they portray their message is based more on where they come from. So you even see like the cultures, even if it's gang culture, it's still different even within all of those genres of music. So I
Hmm.
think it initially started out like, this is real life, this is how we're living. And I think these movies like Menace II Society kind of show, like, visually what they're portraying in their music. Like, this is real life, this is how people are actually living. We're portraying this visually, to kind of go with the background of this music. I think the problem comes in when people who don't actually live that lifestyle now wants to live this lifestyle that is full of guns, drugs, and prostitution and harming women. And because Caine was like, I'm not killing no old people, no children. And old dog was like, I don't care who out there, they gonna get blasted too. And I'm like, children and old people. But Caine was like, I'm not doing that. And no doubt, like, I don't care, everybody can catch this work. And even at the end, when with the last final scene, like, there was a little kid out there, and nobody, they didn't even care it was a kid out there either. So it was like, it comes to a point to where, um it's not, we shouldn't be like, oh, let's go ahead and live this kind of life. And I think as Christians, we have to be honest, like, no, we shouldn't glorify it. But this is people's actual life.
Right.
This is how people actually live. Like, this is what make people susceptible to cults, because they're living in drug infested community, gang
Hmm.
infested community. They're living in high crime areas, poverty ridden areas. Like, even Sharif was part of the Nation of Islam, and
Right.
like, at the time, the Nation of Islam was really popular. Like, that was the most popular cult during the time, so I could see why they put it in there. Like,
Right.
even Sharif was in the Nation of Islam. His dad makes a comment and was like, if Jesus isn't going to help him, and if Allah or Farrakhan or whoever is going to help him get on the right path, I'm all for it. So
Right.
he makes this comment because they make it sound good, like, black people this, and we can uplift our people and all this stuff. Give me a minute. And
Hmm.
all this stuff. And it makes them susceptible to these kind of cults. So we shouldn't glorify, we should understand this is why it is easy for these cults to kind of come in and perpetuate this land of, oh, you'll be free, you'll be loved, we're suffering because of this, if this is what they have going on. So
You know, I'm glad you brought up Mr. Butler because he was interesting, right? Because he, in a sense, he kind of portrays this idea of he puts the two religions against each other, right? Like with Allah and then of course with Christianity. And the quote that you stated earlier, he says, "If Allah can make him a better man than Jesus can, then I'm all for it." So
mm-hmm,
automatically he puts them against each other. But also notice, and this is where identity is so important because Jesus is portrayed in many of the churches at the time and even today as white, right? That's the
mm-hmm.
picture, right? If I say Jesus, your automatic idea is this white guy with
White Jesus.
hair, long hair, beard, looking completely different from individuals who lived in the ancient Near East. And so we have this controversy, and this is where the Black Hebrew Israelites kind of found a lot of their I guess their momentum in focusing and pointing out the lie of a white Jesus, and then saying that the Christian church is lying to you, and it opens up the opportunity for them to deceive many people using the stereotype or or individuals being misled. And this is why I think it's so important for us not to create an image of what God looks like. We do not know what Jesus looked like. We don't have the picture. But we know he didn't look like that because nobody then at that time and where they lived looked like that. But this is why it's very important that within our community, we don't put up that image. Because what happens is, number one, it creates what's the word I'm looking for? It creates controversy right from the outset. And once the lie is discovered that, hey, that's not what Jesus looked like, the scriptures don't even talk about him looking like that. Why is he up there? Now you're giving a foothold to Satan and you're giving a foothold to
Mm-hmm.
these cults to kind of use that lie and say Christian preachers and pastors are lying to you, like what happened in this film. So immediately individuals are thinking like that. And so I think it was, who was it that said that he was it Caine's grandfather was worshiping this white Jesus. I'm trying to remember who was it that said that. Was it Old Dog that said it?
It was old dog because after the grandfather was like Leviticus 30:13,
Mm-hmm.
thou shalt not kill, because he was quoting the Bible to him. And then him and old dog went outside and they was having a conversation. And old dog was like, black people got enough religion as it is, and it ain't helped us no bit anyway.
Mm.
And so like they're already making a claim that we have all this religion, and where has all this religion gotten us? Like it has
Right.
literally gotten us nowhere. And like we've been Christians, and I think that's kind of like they didn't touch on it too much, but again, it makes it easy for cults to come in because they already feel disenfranchised, and they're like, "Well, we've tried Jesus, we're still stuck here. What good is it doing us?" And then they come in like, "Well, you're the true Jews, or did you know that uh, uh, uh Prophet Muhammad was Allah and Elijah Muhammad is his prophet and blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah, and we're the black people and we're being held down for the white devil and all this other stuff." So it's like they spin this rhetoric like you're oppressed because of your specialness. You're oppressed because these people don't want you to rise up because you're special. So now it's okay for you to be oppressed because you're oppressed because you're specialness. You're
Right.
not oppressed just because you're black. You're oppressed because you're special and you're black and you're special. But
Right.
but you don't, because Christianity is like anybody can come. Like your image, you're the imago Dei. That's what
Mm.
makes you special. You're created in the image of God. That's what makes you special. Your identity being in Christ makes you special. But you want to be special because you're black, and it makes you feel like there's a reason for my suffering and my oppression other than the hearts of men are evil.
Right.
And so instead of you being like, oh, well, this is because the hearts of men are evil, it's no, no, I have to be special, or why else would God put me in this? And a lot of times we don't have an answer for the problem of evil. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to deal with theodicy. So we do it no justice when we have to discuss theodicy with people who are looking for hope and who are looking for something to make them make them feel better about their station in life or how they're situated. So it's like we have that in Christianity, but even having that in Christianity, people don't want to hold on to that because they feel that why would a just and loving God allow me to suffer the way that I'm suffering? And why was I born into this family with a dad who sells dope and murders people and who got killed, and my
Mm-hmm.
mom's a drug addict, and my dad beat my mom because she's a drug addict, and why am I 15, 16 years old and I'm allowed to be a drug addict, and why am I 15, 16 years old and I'm allowed to buy beer, hang out with people, and not be accountable, and I'm out here just murdering folks and wilding out and stealing cars and acting a fool. It's like, how am I able to be at 18 able to go buy uh, a Mustang 5.0? Those cars were the things to have back in the days. My uncle
Yeah.
had one. And like, why am I able to have all of this and, live this kind of life? And if God loved me, I wouldn't have to trap to do it. I wouldn't have to sell dope to do it. So then you come to a point to where you are questioning God because your life has been so hard. And it's like, we don't understand because it's like God is sovereign and infinite in all his wisdom. And we don't understand why things happen the way they happen, but it's never us to really question him. I mean, you can question him, and sometimes you get an answer, sometimes you won't. Job never really got an answer for his questioning.
Right.
And I mean, but he still believed in God. But it's like it makes it easy to go in. And then when a lot of this stuff was done under the guise of Christianity, and then when people say this, instead of people actually doing the work to research history, they just take it at face value. So
Right.
now it's like, yeah, let's go ahead and believe this because it sounds good, because now I feel like maybe I'll have some hope.
So here's the thing. When it comes to the way things are portrayed on screen, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the film itself was these subplots and themes that they kept pushing through the film, right? You have the overall, okay, gang violence, the cursing, and all that. If you just think surface, then it's a foolish movie to you. But if you think about, like you said, or like you stated earlier, this film is how people live, right? It's in a sense like a documentary just told through, film, because this
Mm-hmm.
is how people live. And there was one thing that was echoed through the film that I really liked that they did. Number one, Butler tells him, "Think about your life." And
Mm-hmm.
when I heard that, I was like, "Yo, that's a dope part of the film," because it should get individuals who are watching the film who may be in that lifestyle to pause and wait, like, wait a minute. Let me actually think about where the ultimate end is. Um, what am I doing? Does it matter? What's the ultimate end to my behavior? What could happen? And so he started thinking about his life. And this also helped me to think we need more positive male role models,
Mm-hmm.
individuals who are going to question us and say, why are you doing what you're doing? Let me point you in a different direction, in the right direction. And I think like what we do here on Real Reviews, on Servant of Christ Ministries, on all the urban apologetic channels, we're giving people, by God's grace, positive role models, male role models and female role models that can help people kind of walk in the way that they should go. Right. And so I think it's one thing that the film did it, but I saw so many parallels with even us in the film. In that, we are those positive voices. You know what I mean? We are those voices that are not telling people, yeah, yeah, you should just dress how you want to dress, talk how you want to talk, behave how you want to behave. But rather, we're saying, listen, man, there are consequences. You can do whatever you want. You're free to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but there are consequences to your behavior, whether positive or evil. Like if you behave a certain way that's right, then there are positive consequences that come from that. And, a lot of the time you saw that Caine contemplated life in these smaller scenes, like when he was in the hospital, after he had just got shot, he sat down and he contemplated. And it's in those moments where either we hear the voice of God, we're reading scripture, where anything is like God is trying to talk to you. And if you ignore those small moments and say, you know what, I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing, then what's going to happen is what happened to Caine at the end of this film. And the one thing
Mm-hmm.
that hit me in the heart, right as I was watching the film, and he almost said it exactly verbatim while it was happening because I was picking up on it. I was like, sometimes you can make the right decision too late.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that hit me in the heart. So I don't know. As far as like making the right decision too late, I know we jumped to the end of the film, but we can still talk about it back and forth. He ends up dying, getting shot. Like you said earlier, he lived by the sword and he died by the sword. And so, what are some of your thoughts as it pertains to his ultimate end and actually having to contemplate life and as far as making the good decisions too late?
So I will say when it comes to his ultimate end, again, our decisions have consequences. So he he again he goes from being like more contemplative, like I've never murdered nobody, but I've seen all this stuff happen, but I wasn't actually partaking in this. We'll go back to the beginning scene. So the
Hmm.
beginning scene, old dog goes in there, um, off the shop owner, takes the tape and starts showing the tape to everybody. I'm bringing this up because it's all kind of accumulate to the end of the movie.
Right.
It's a culmination of all kinds of stuff. So
Hmm.
again, it's like a lot of little stuff. So we see like in the beginning, Kane's like, oh my gosh, like I went in there to get some beer and now I'm an accessory. Like you just never know what's gonna happen in the hood. And because he wasn't expecting this. That's not what he wanted to do. Even after he was shot and it was like, we're gonna ride on these people. He really didn't want to do it. And he was like, I'm not shooting uh no old people and no babies. So we
Hmm.
go from this Caine to dude come to his house and he just starts dumping him out. And so
Right.
it's like you go from I'm not going to be as crazy as these people to watch me be as crazy as these people. So you start to see like his actions getting worse as you go through the movie because after he stumps the dude out, he then so it's a phrase that Chauncey, that's it comes from Menace II Society. So
Hmm.
Chauncey was the dude. So then like Chauncey's acting the fool with Ronnie and he goes and pistol whoops Ronnie.
Right.
And so I don't think his decision even was his decision. They Chauncey sends the tape to the police that old dog was showing everybody after Caine was like, stop showing people this tape, don't show nobody this tape. And then Chauncey sends the tape to the police. So him and old dog were actually kind of like on the run because they were looking for them at the time because he makes the comment like old dog is hiding out and all this other stuff. And it's like, how is he hiding out? He's like under 18. Like I kept thinking like he's under 18. Like what is he doing with his life? And it's like everybody was trying to get Caine to go with them because they could kind of see where he was going. And they're like, we're trying to do something better We want you to be a part of this before you become part of this culture of death and murder and drugs and pain and turmoil and torment. Like, we don't want you to be part of that. And so I think his decision wasn't even really his decision. He was kind of forced to it. So he's like, y'all
Mm-hmm.
go with you. Because what is he gonna do? His grandparents were like, we not having this. And the one person's house he was hiding at is now leaving. What are you gonna do? You don't have any real choice or turn yourself in. And I don't think he wanted to turn himself in. So it's like your options have been limited by your own actions. So
Right.
now you can't even make a choice that you really may not have made on your own, because you have had this choice made for you because of your own actions, not because of what somebody else did, not because of whatever else. You made these choices. So now you have to do this. And even if you would have left, what kind of life you would have lived, been on the run? Because technically you was on the run because they got you for this,
Mm-hmm.
this murder. So it's like now your choices are coming back to hunt you, and you don't even have any choice in the matter of what you even do at this point. So we see that, and then we see like him stumping out the guy. Then the guy comes, and Sharif is innocent. He's like, he the one who in the NOI. He don't smoke, he don't drink. Again, bad company corrupt good morals. And sometimes you just hang with the wrong people. You have to be very careful who your friends are. Now he's dead. And he had nothing to do with any of this. He murdered nobody. He ain't stumped nobody out. He
Mm-hmm.
ain't been involved in this stuff. He ain't out here sleeping with a bunch of women. He ain't on drugs. And now he is a casualty of somebody else's decisions. So our decisions don't just affect us. I say this all the time. Our decisions don't just affect us. Our decisions affect people around us. Our decisions affect people immediately and in the long term. Our decisions can cause a domino effect of a lot of people's lives to be damaged because we made poor choices. So Caine's poor choice now leads to Sharif being dead. Now Ronnie's baby Anthony is traumatized
Mm.
because he didn't see the man who's been like his father, since his father ain't never getting out of jail. Now
Right.
the man who's been like your father, you watch him die in front of you. And he runs to try to protect him because he's on top of him to protect him so he won't get murdered. And now the baby's traumatized, and it's like you have your choice and old dog's choice too. Like y'all choices have led to a lot of turmoil in people's lives. Not to mention the family of the people that they like old dog murdered. We now see all of these choices and decisions leading to a bad outcome. Old dog's probably never gonna get out of jail, and he's like 16 in this movie, and Caine is dead. And this is his second brush with death. And he makes a statement at the very end. I was asked, do I care if I live or I die? And now I realize I do, and it's too late. Like, that's his final words in the movie. And it's
Right.
like, if you don't care how you live, you obviously don't care if you die. And that's like that. My dad told my brother that a long, long time ago. He said, if you don't care how you live, apparently you don't care how you die. Because if you living crazy, you don't know what crazy things gonna happen to you. You just don't. And even if you live right, you still don't know if you hanging out with people who don't got no sense because you still don't care. So
You know what? You got so many dope things to talk about. Um, there was one portion of the film that I thought was very interesting, and I want to get your take on it. I'll tell a little bit about what I think. There's a quote in the film, and I think it's O Dog that says it. He says a lot of crazy things, but a lot of things that should wake individuals up to the kind of lifestyle that he's being exposed to. He says, "God doesn't care about us. Look where we are at." And
hmm
that hit me in the heart because if you think about the environment they're being raised in, they don't think God cares about them. They're living in slums and ghettos and surrounded by violence and drugs and the abuse of alcohol, the degradation of their own people and women and all of this stuff is surround. It's almost like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's just crazy. But he says that, and the first thing that I'm thinking about is like, man, there are a lot of people who are thinking like this. It's like, okay, I'm in pain. I've been traumatized. Why should I think that God loves me? And so, if somebody were to ask you that question and say, hey, I live in this environment. It's horrible. God doesn't care about us. What are some of the things you just might say, or even to encourage them, or even to talk about that subject? Because it's hard to have that conversation, especially when they have so much negative input into their life because of the environment, working through all of that can be extremely difficult. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I guess I typically I try to be very compassionate when it comes to stuff like that, because most people do say that in a place of like really like they didn't have trauma and they had pain. It's like I do a lot of like street outreach,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people in those kind of neighborhoods actually say these kinds of things. And so like you got to be very sympathetic. You got to measure your words very carefully. But I
Mm-hmm.
typically ask them, at what moment did they feel God didn't care about them? Because it's never just the overall situation. It's typically a moment, and it's typically an event that made them start to feel God didn't care about them.
Mm-hmm.
It and like they'll normally tell me that moment, or they'll tell me surrounding things in that moment, and I'll typically deal with those things like individually, because it's typically something that actually happened to them to make them feel that way. It's never just like arbitrary, like, well, just look where I live at. It's never just look where I live at. It's never just look at our environment. Is normally this thing happened to me. I had no control over it. It hurt me deeply, and now I feel God don't care. It's never just look where we live. It's
Mm-hmm.
never that. Like it's never really just that. And so like I go over like men's hearts are evil. We all have free will, just like you have the free will to make the statement. God don't care about you. Whatever happened, these people have these free will, and we can't stop people from doing bad things. We can only control our own actions. We can only control our responses to the things that come around us, to what happens, to, like things that happen, and and it's like it rains on the just and the unjust. It's not always going to be bright and happy days, even as a Christian. Bad
Mm-hmm.
things happen to Christians too. Um, but we can't negate the hearts of man being evil. We can't negate that we live in a fallen world. We can't negate the fact that evil happens. Like it just does. Like some people are really just bad people, and some people are just going to do evil to people because they think they can get away with it. Because a lot of times, if you think you're not gonna get caught, you'll start doing stuff that you may not normally do because you feel like you're invincible. So, like again, look at the cults that we have gone through, like talked about in like real reviews. A lot of these people felt they were invincible, and they did worse and worse and worse things. And these are real people. This isn't even like a made up character. They've done worse and worse things because they felt they could just get away with these things, and they thought they could just keep doing these things over and over and over again. And they didn't care about the harm that they were causing other people. And in reality, that harm can be so deep that it makes people be like, I no longer trust God because these people said that, or these people did this. There's no way that a God who is loving could love me and allow these things to happen to me. And it doesn't negate God's love for you. It doesn't negate that God, still, even if you didn't feel like it was the protection you wanted, there was still protection for you there. And so I just normally deal with the situation, or I'll try to help them, walk them through the actual trauma, because it's never just, oh, this happened. It's normally something happened. And it's because you see Caine's grandparents love God. It was fine. And they lived in the hood too,
Right.
so they were in the same environment, and they did not live like this. So it's normally an event. Like for Caine, he watched his dad do all this crazy stuff. His dad was a drug dealer. His mom was on drugs. So he started kind of going down that path, selling drugs and stuff. Again, we don't know Old Dog's story, but I can imagine it's probably worse than Caine's because Old Dog was off the hook. And
Right.
so like we see these situations, and we see these different environments, and I don't think it had anything to necessarily do with them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it had to do with a lot of stuff that was happening around them as well. So it just really depends on what the person has going on and what they're going through in their life.
You know, definitely. Dana Owens, shout out to her. She says, when men exercise their free will to go against God's way, it affects others adversely. Then she says, all sin is communal. I love that
Mm-hmm.
you brought that up because sometimes we try to detach, and you mentioned that earlier, and that everything that we do affects other people, whether good or bad. And the fact that sin is communal, all sin is communal, it does affect. The one that's not communal, it says, well, I guess in a sense it is the one that, a sexual sin, right, destroys you, but you're also destroying
Mm-hmm.
another person on top of it's not your spouse. and you're
Yeah.
traumatizing them in that way. So yeah, she's absolutely right. Um, you know, there's a couple of things I definitely want to make sure I mention because, of course, there's just so much here. Um, if I
It is a
showed
lot in this movie.
if I showed you my notes, it's 2 or 3 pages of just notes. There's no way we're going to talk about all of it. I promise you. I'm not going to keep you
No,
here
no,
that
no,
long.
no. Because I'm like, we got time frame. I
we,
might not be working tomorrow. I still got things to do.
right. You still definitely got things to do. But one of the things I definitely want to make sure I mention, number one was the white guy in the movie getting the black
Oh,
man
we
to
gotta talk
steal.
about him.
Okay, I'll let you already know I was going to mention this. So here's the thing, that the guy was going into the hood, getting people to steal for him. Give me your thoughts. I won't even say nothing. Forget my thoughts. What did you think about that scene?
The irony of it, like you're so scared of this neighborhood that you don't want to come at night. Because when Chauncey was like coming back tonight around 10:30, he's like, this neighborhood, what? Like, like you see the poverty, so you're using these people to steal for you, so you won't get in trouble.
Hmm.
But you'll be the same person, like, I can't believe these thugs out in the street who are doing this kind of stuff because you are making money off the backs of crime-ridden youth who will go to jail and do time and nothing will happen to you. Even if they tell on you, nothing will happen to you.
Right.
They're going to give you a slap on the wrist at most, and the kids are going to do the time, and they're going to make sure they go to jail. So it's like, even with that, we still see how they go into these communities, use these kids to get stuff that they want, and then be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these kids are like this. Like, you guys literally push drugs and guns in these communities. So I think showing him come like through to have them commit crimes, it's like the same thing that actually happens in real life. They push this stuff in these communities. Like, cocaine isn't, like, the coca leaf is not growing in Compton. The coca leaf is not growing in Watts. The coca leaf is not growing in Marcy Project. The coca leaf is not growing in the Short North. That's all I'm saying. The coca leaf ain't grown there. So how are they getting this cocaine? Who's this? Like, I mean, how they getting this in here? Like,
Right.
how are we getting these drugs? This is like, I mean, meth is probably the one drug that you can cook without having to need stuff from them people. But
Right.
like, let's be honest, the main drugs of choice, the stuff that's needed to actually get it, it's not grown in the United States. So how are they getting it? So it's like, this is how. It's because people are coming from outside, coming in and supplying the stuff, and they're making the profit. But the crime, but the people in prison are the lower level people. So it's like, how is this happening? And it kind of made me think of that. Like, he's coming in here, he's making his request known, but he's not going to be the one to be blamed or even get in trouble, because they actually went to jail. Like, when Caine went to jail and he was being questioned, was because they were trying to steal the ultimate for the white dude. So again, the white dude didn't do no time. Nobody said nothing about him. Nobody flipped on him. But Caine and O-Dog were the ones who, well, they let O-Dog go, but Caine had to go for a little bit to jail for that. So it's like, he didn't do no time for that. They were the ones who still had to carry the whole burden of that situation, even though they were doing it for an outsider who came in to perpetuate more crime in these communities. So it's like, not even all the crime in the communities was caused by them. So it's like,
Wow.
outside factors are now affecting them, and they're the ones who's carrying the burden for whatever happens with these outside factors.
But you know what? I also noticed that now that you brought up the scene where they were kind of being interrogated. Notice he didn't have no lawyer representation. He was just
Nope.
being questioned by the cops. No representation, no lawyer was helping him in that sense. So it was something that definitely kind of shocked me as it pertained to that. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and then I want to get your final thoughts on the film. Even though you disappeared on me, sis. Let me see. You know what? If you guys have any, let me read some of your comments while she's going back and forth. Let me see. Revelator says, these gangs will shoot you if they don't know you, if you are wearing the wrong color or from a rival, probably a rival gang. You know, it's interesting. One of the things that I thought was important in the film was when it actually showed, what is it? The Mexican gang, right? Remember the cops beat up O-Dog and Caine threw them out in the Hispanic neighborhood, thinking that the
It was Caine and
Hispanics were.
Sharif.
Oh, I'm sorry, Caine and
It was
Sharif.
Caine and Sharif.
And so they thought he was going to get beat up by the Mexican gangs. And the one thing that I loved about the film is because as you're watching the film, your automatic thought and idea is, okay, now they're going to get jumped by the Mexican gangs. But what the director did, which I thought was pretty genius, was kind of deceive the audience and actually have the Mexican gang take them to the hospital. And it was, to me, very telling of the character of the individuals, because everybody believes that people who are Black, Hispanic are just always like, they're always the aggressors, that we don't care about our own people and things like that, or care about others. And the film did a wonderful job in showing that even within that gang life, rival gangs, there is still humanity. Individuals are still loving of other people to some degree. So I love that the director took that turn with it, because everybody, even me, I'm like, oh man, they're about to get stomped out, because I hadn't watched the movie in a long time, so I totally forgot about everything in the film. But that right there showed me that the director behind this film wasn't out to misrepresent or make fun of Black or Hispanic people or anything like that, or even Asians, the Koreans in the store. It was just about portraying what was actually happening in the world, and that there are semblances of hope, and that individuals do, to some degree, want to love and care for one another, but they're going about it the wrong way. And because of what they're exposed to. And this is why I kind of harp on, be careful with what you watch, be careful with what you listen to and what you support, right? Because look at the music today. It's the same thing that in the past, I mean, you did, but now it's even worse in that it's glorified that you a gangster. It's glorified that you mistreat women. You got, quote unquote, expletive in different area codes, right? And so my thing is, we as Christians have to expose that evil and say, listen, this is not how we should live, and this is why. And I think in a worldly sense or in a secular sense, that's what this film was doing, was exposing what happens in the real world, the evil that happens in it, and to take people and say, you should not behave this way because this is what it leads to. And even though there was foul language, this is the kind of life that people live. Like you were talking about, it's like, I can't believe that people live this way. I know that there are individuals who watch this film, whether, from whatever nationality, you belong to, you probably were shocked. You're like, oh, everything is just pushed to the extreme, but it's not.
It wasn't.
And that's the scary part. It's like, that's real. And it probably in reality is much more extreme than what we saw on the screen.
It is. It really is much more extreme. And so, like, I'm glad you brought the fact that they thought the essays was gonna get them, and the essays was like I think honestly, California, they all realize like they're kind of fighting the same battle. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, even if like you're a Blood or you're a Crip or whatever, like at the end of the day, they're all still fighting the same battle. So I'll get, like, it was at one point, I can't remember the name of it, but they were like, they had like a put your gangs down stuff kind of like rally. And it was like, if we give you guys training and we give you guys jobs, will you guys put you guys stop gang banging? And the gang members and leaders was like, yeah, if you can give us jobs with livable wages, we will put it down. Right. So they was like, we're going to give you training. You guys have to. So that's what we got. So like during this time, it was a CD called Banging on Wax. And that was like one of the times they were starting to kind of stop gang banging and kind of like come together, because they were promised like, you'll get these jobs, you'll get this training. And so they stopped gang banging, thinking they were going to get these jobs and stuff, and they never got them. So guess what they did? They went back to gang banging. It's like a period of time where like the crime rate went down. Right. And it was because they promised them these stuff. So it's like, these people, if you are like, oh, you guys doing this and you guys are doing this, why don't you just get a job? If you don't have a livable wage, how you gonna get a job? And then if you slap a felony on somebody, that's even harder for them to get a job. So you want people who went from making $70,000 a month, and I'm not even exagerating. Like, people laugh when I say this,
probably
like,
under exaggerating. You're probably holding back some numbers.
I'm actually being very. I'm just trying not to say, because I don't want to be like, "Shit, how you know these things? Don't worry about it." But just know, like, you now want somebody who makes $70,000 a month to go and get a job making $5.50, as a server, or make $12 an hour at McDonald's.
Mm.
They fam, they made the manager's salary in a month, and now you want them to ask them, "Do you want salt on your fries?" And again, you can't live off these wages. So they were able to not just live but thrive and flourish. And now you want them to barely be able to pay their bills. And you provide no training and no real jobs, and then you have poor education systems. And like we're starting, like even in New York, I'll just use New York as an example because this is actually happening in real time. So they're a sanctuary city. So because New York is a sanctuary city, they are now dropping busloads of immigrants to New York because they're like, "Oh, y'all don't want them, and y'all keep trying to tell us we're gonna close this border, we're gonna close this border, blah blah blah." Mind you, we're a Christian nation, and God said, "Take care of the sojourner." Sojourner is a foreigner. I digress. And they're dropping them off. So now they're putting them in the neighborhoods with the Black kids, and they already have an overstressed education system. So now you're putting barriers. A lot of these kids don't speak English. So now an overstressed, underfunded school now has to find a way to make sure these children who are being bussed in out of nowhere now have access, because they deserve an education too. They're now being bussed in. So now you have to find ways so they can learn. So now an underfunded school is now even more burdened with more stuff. And now they have to figure out how they're going to take this money and stretch it even farther to ensure all the kids get a decent education. Well, you're underfunded. A lot of these kids are going to slip through the cracks and not have a decent education. If you don't have a decent education, it's going to be very hard for you to thrive in America. Like, I know, I'm like, you can go get a trade, but to get a trade, you need a high school diploma to go to these training schools. So it's like we're setting people up for failure. Even today, we're still setting these people up for failure. And then we wonder why they start selling drugs and they start, pushing weight, and they start in all these kind of things. But we set them up for failure in step one. We set them up for failure, and then on step 20, them to all of a sudden be successful. That's not how this works. So we start to see these things kind of come together. And even with the essays, again, they like, we fight the same struggle. They come and beat us up too and drop us off over there and think that we're going to get the same kind of treatment. So,
yeah, I mean, I can tell you just from watching the film, like in a sense, even though there was, bad language and all that stuff, I really enjoyed this film. Like, I really enjoyed it because it was so moving. There were times where I choked up because I'm gonna tell you where I choked up was, and this is
everywhere.
and this is a very I love when directors do a good job storytelling. The film opened up with Caine as a little kid being surrounded by madness. The film ends in the same way with the younger kid, Jada Pinkett's son, surrounded by that same thing. He walks out onto the stoop. He shows him the gun and all this stuff, and you're seeing what the director was doing with that. And just for the audience, so you know that storytelling is so important. What he was doing with showing you the same thing at the beginning and at the end is showing you there's a cycle, right? His whole idea was to put into the audience's mind that this is an unending cycle and we need to stop the cycle somewhere. We have to stop exposing our kids to this wickedness, right? And start exposing them to things that are more righteous, and so that this cycle doesn't continue. And I don't know, to me, like, that hit me in the heart, because I'm like, as a Christian, I felt like a very heavy burden, a heavy responsibility, not only for just my daily interactions with people that I do on a daily basis, but also even on something like Real Reviews or Servant of Christ Ministries, where, yes, we talk about film here. We have a good time. There's shenanigans. We have fun. But we're talking about real life things, things that are going to affect you. And our goal with the channel is to help and to have these conversations on film, because everybody on Real Reviews loves film and movies. We talk about it. We nerd out about it. But at the end of the day, we're Christians. That's first. And so we have to be able to examine these films through a Christian lens and talk about the good things that are in film, whether it's the way it was shot, the way the story was told, the bad things, whether, they just told the story badly. But most importantly, it's the ugly, right? The things that go against the gospel and go against Christ. And so if I was going to say anything that's ugly in this film, it's the lifestyle, the drugs, the drunkenness, of course, the violence, right? The hatred for your fellow man because you're trying to live up to whatever standards been kind of pumped in your ears through music and media and things like that. This is why I think it's so important that we pay attention and be aware of the things that we listen to and the things that we watch. And then we educate individuals on the things that are out there. Because in film, like we talked about before, our job is to expose it, to talk about it. So that way you're not just kind of going with the flow of whatever, society or the media wants you to go, right? Social media, in a sense, can control how people think by exposing them to certain things and creating hatred between people. And so if you're a Christian, you should be able to filter that out. But even a Christian, even strong Christians can actually succumb to the peer pressures of society. And that's what I think this film did an excellent job in. So that's my rant. Michelle, I want to hear your final thoughts, what people should know about this film. If you want to reiterate again why you like this film, and just kind of let's get your final thoughts. And you can give it a rating if you want to. I know we haven't done that in a while.
5 stars.
Five.
But I will say this. I want to touch back on something that you said. The Bible says the older man shall teach the younger, the older woman shall teach the younger women, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you brought up a cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Caine, when it first comes on, he goes out on the stoop of Purnell, and Purnell shows him. He's like, what's that? And he shows him his gun, right? He goes see Purnell. Purnell was like, because apparently Purnell helped raise him.
Right.
And so he's crying when he sees Purnell. Purnell's like, your letters when I first got in here is what got me through. Please don't let my son end up like us. Don't have him in the same kind of cycle that we're in. Because Purnell recognized at this point he in jail, he never getting out. And he's like, I was taken away from my son. I was taken away from my girl. Like my whole life was over. And if you're doing that kind of time, it's only like a couple of reasons you never getting out of jail.
Right.
And so he's in there and he's telling Caine, like, don't let my son go through the same things that you went through or I went through. But we also see when Caine is in there playing the game with Anthony does kind of what Caine did and was like, what's that? And so Caine shows him the gun and Jada Pinkett walks in and she's like, don't do this. But you realize when in the beginning, Caine's mom seen the same thing and she comes out and she's like, can you get in this house and go in the room? But she didn't make it seem like it was a bad thing that Purnell was showing Caine guns and they was letting him drink. His mom just wanted him to go in the room so his dad went that crazy. But Ronnie, that's Jada Pinkett's character, but Ronnie was very upset and very mad that Caine would allow her son to do this. And he was like, oh, you used to be down. And she's like, I got a kid now. I can't be down with whatever we was doing back then. I now have to raise my son and look after my son. So she was already trying to break the cycle. And so she was trying to get Caine to not be in this cycle as well, because Caine was helping her raise her son because his dad was in jail. And so even like both the parents kind of wanted Caine to not be part of this cycle. So we see these things and we see how Purnell kind of raised Caine up with, and Caine at the end finally like, I'm going to, I guess, be better and go off and live. But Purnell was taken away from Caine and now Caine is taken away from Anthony. So now we still see this same kind of cycle where the person that you needed to help you is no longer there because of their choices. And again, our choices don't just affect us, it affects other people. And now Purnell taken away from Caine, even though Purnell's still living, it's very difficult to help somebody when you're in jail. And now Caine is taken away from Anthony because of Caine's choices. So this cycle does continue. And now Anthony is seeing, like I said, and he's seen Caine murdered in front of him. That's very traumatizing. So we do have to understand that there are certain cycles. If we keep the same thing, insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So we're living in insanity. We're not going to change anything. We have to be very honest. And honestly, the only thing that's going to change us is having a relationship with Christ, is being a Christian, walking in that sanctification, having accountability, being in your local church, being involved in ministry. Those things will help um, you grow and develop and become a better person day by day. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time and it takes work, but the work is worth it in the end. So that's what I do. I did want to. I thought that was a really good point, and I wanted to kind of like show how that actually looked in the film too. But
Hmm.
I would give this film, of course, a 5-star rating.
Of
This
course.
again, it was either going to be Menace Society or Tales from the Hood. Both would have got a 5-star. Both of them actually have really good themes. And it tells from the hood don't have as much cussing. It has some. It don't have as much cussing, but I will say that the movie is a very good movie for the fact that it really does show you what real life look like for some people who may
Hmm.
not look like you. And when people be like, just preach the gospel, you never see those people preaching the gospel in these kind of neighborhoods. So
Mm.
again, it makes them very susceptible to cults because you just preach the gospel or not actually preaching the gospel. Because if you were and the gospel was going forth, the gospel is the evangelion, the good news. If the good news is going forth, they will have hope. But you don't preach the gospel for real, especially in people who look like that in those neighborhoods. Just like the white guy who went in there, like, I'm not coming after dark. They don't go there either. The preach the gospel crowd, I'm sorry, I'm on soapbox now, but the preach the gospel crowd is not going into those neighborhoods like the white guy want to go in there because they see no value to it. They see no value because they wouldn't just spring preach the gospel. They will actually be like, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel. But they don't do that. And I assure you they don't because I actually do go there to preach the gospel. I ain't seen none of them. Like, I literally have seen none of them out there preaching the gospel. Caine and Old Dog ain't seen them either. They ain't seen them people either. That's why they're like, we ain't got no hope in Jesus because y'all not out here showing them what the love of Christ looks like. If we
Mm.
want people to see the love of Christ, we are the example they need to see. The evangelion to herald that good news, it has to be heralded with a voice. We are that voice. We need to go spread the gospel, share the good news with people. Even if people don't look like us, the people don't look like you, these people need the good news. The people, even people with a lot of money, they need the good news too. We need to be very diligent about ministering the gospel to all nations, okay? And we like want to be missionaries and run off and go to other countries. One thing I respect about Chris is that he's a missionary in his own city and state because we need people being missionaries and living that life in America. Like, they probably should send some of their missionaries over here to help us because we're
Wow.
seeing missionaries like we got it together when in reality we need a lot of missions here and a lot of missionaries here. We're building shelters and houses overseas when we have a homeless problem that's exploding and we're not building no shelters and no housing here. So it's like we're hypocrites. We want to be, we really are. The church, we're acting like hypocrites going around like, let's save these other nations. And then we come home like, how dare they? How dare they? You
Mm.
got to be woke if you want to help these people. But then you
Wow.
go and do the same thing to another nation. You must be woke too. I'm confused. I guess you only woke when you're helping your own people. Very confused at how this works. But I feel like if we want to see change affected in any community, we need to be out there giving people that hope and that good news that Jesus Christ is the risen Savior. And through Him, you can have that same hope. You too can see the kingdom when it comes. Like, you can have this hope that we have. The joy that we have is not because of anything that we've done. It's not because of our worldly possessions. It's literally because of Christ. You too can have this joy in the good and the bad, whether you be abased or be abound, whether you have lack or you have no needs at all, you too can have the joy of Christ. Regardless of where you're at, you too can have this. And we have to be very diligent with letting people know that we have the answer. And the answer is Jesus. It's not, we're not the answer. Money isn't going to be the answer. Jesus is the only way, the only hope that you'll ever have. He's the risen Savior. We're the only people who have a risen Savior. And we have our hope in Christ. And we have the historicity of Christ to back us up too. So, with all that said, if you don't know Jesus, you need to get your life right now. Can't no dog, I'm talking to you too. 5 stars.
Oh man, sis, I'm not gonna say anything after that. That was a dope way to end the show, and I personally want to thank you in front of everybody for telling me to watch this film, even though I was hesitant, uh, because I was like, man, please, my conscience, right? Because I'm very, and we talk about it behind the scenes. I'm very careful on purpose. It's not because, oh, I've never seen a movie that has cursing in it, or I've never seen violence or bad things in film. It has nothing to do with that. I know that every time we talk about a film and the way we talk about the film, people are going to want to go watch it. So my conviction is to make sure that I'm okay with you watching a certain film. And so I'm not going to be able to talk about every single movie, every type of show, every type, I'm not going to be able to just from my conscience. But after watching this film, the thing is bad language. So if that's something that affects you, don't watch it. It's not. You could just watch us talk about it and you would have got the gist of the movie, probably more than just watching the movie. But, Michelle, I want to thank you again publicly for having me watch this film again. It created a great conversation, and we are definitely, you know what? Let's in the future do Tales from the Hood. I want to do that one. I trust you. I trust you now. I trust you. You and the shenanigans. I trust you.
Y'all should see his face. Y'all should see his face when I said that. He was like, "What you say, Ham? What you say?" I said, "Yep." I think he was very surprised that Menace II Society was my favorite movie. Like, what you say? I don't know why he was surprised. He should have been like, "That's probably spot on for your kind of shenanigans. Your kind of carrying on is the reason why you like this movie."
Amen. Amen. Well, sis, again, I want to thank you. So make sure you got. What are you working on in the future? Because I know you're part of a group, the Bodega Ladies and all that stuff. Do you guys have anything coming down chain or?
I'm for the street.
Oh, please explain that, because I don't want people to take that wrong. Okay, every time you say I'm for the streets, my feet go like this under the table. I'm like, explain what you mean, sis.
Every time I say that, people be like, "You are not for the streets." I am for the streets. I just don't know why nobody wants to accept that. I'm not for the streets the way that they like, "Oh, you out here." I'm still a virgin, so I'm not apparently not those streets, but I'm for the streets. Just know I'm for the streets. And if you want to be about that life, come find out. That's all I got for you.
All right. We're gonna end this show before it ends bad. But thank you, sis. Really quickly, I saw.
Red, look at him. That's my goal.
Whatever, man. Listen, I got a shout out to Mr. Phil Fox. I didn't know, but now I know, thanks to It's Time for the Revelator. He said it's Mr. Phil Fox's birthday. So
yep, it is.
Happy birthday, bro. God bless you. God bless you, man. You are cool, bro. Make sure you guys go and subscribe to Mr. Phil Fox. He's going to be, I think it's coming up soon. He has another show, Doctrine of Discovery, I think part 2 coming out. So make sure you guys go subscribe to his channel. The first one was awesome. So make sure you guys go ahead and check it out. So that way you go ahead and show him some support and show him some love. Okay. So again, thank you, Michelle. Let me do my little outro. All right. So everybody out there, I want to say God bless you. Thank you for joining us here on Real Reviews. If there is anyone you want me to interview about their favorite film and why it means so much to them, and you want me to talk to them, make sure you leave it in the comments section below. Make sure you subscribe to Real Reviews. We're going to be talking about some interesting things coming up. So make sure you guys go ahead and smash the like button if you want conversations like this to make it to the masses. One of the biggest things that you can do to help this channel, number one, pray for us, that we talk about the things that need to be spoken about. Number 2, there are links in the description box below where you can help support the ministry to help it grow. And of course, make sure you smash the like button. That's one of the biggest indicators that there's a lot of engagement, and it will actually help push this video into the algorithm, into the YouTube world, and allow us to reach many with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So with that said, thank you for joining us on Real Reviews, and we will see you on the next review. God bless and peace out.